What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the YouTube channel. I'm your host, Vartanian, with my co-host, Martin Levionnois, the FPL Oracle. It's another edition of the FPL show, Game Week 10, Marty. But before we get into it, Mohamed Salah, probably one of the best players in the world at the moment, one of the best FPL players. Incredible haul against Manchester United. And obviously the smart people put their money on him last weekend as their captain. Others decided to go the other way, like myself, and went with Havertz. Yes, I mean, you can classify that as a mistake, but considering Havertz had a good fixture against Norwich, I thought it was a good decision to go with him. But regardless, Salah, once again, I've been scouring the interwebs through the FPL community, and everyone seems to think, moving forward, the move should be the permanent captain, Mohamed Salah, and just forget about the rest. Your thoughts?
I mean, I totally understand it. There's no better player in FPL, and really, like you said, one of the best players in the world, if not the best player in the world right now. And I mean, when you look at considering him as a permanent captain in your team, just look at his run of returns in FPL. He's scored in the last, 2, 4, 6, 7 games, and that includes games against Chelsea at home. They played Man City at home, and Manchester United, obviously, we saw what he did to them this past weekend. So I totally understand it. This is an example of someone being just so good. They're fixture proof. He's in the form of his life. So if you're a form manager, it makes sense. If you're a fixture manager, it makes sense because it doesn't really matter. And I think it's tricky though, because as much as I want to just throw that armband on him, slap it on him, and just ride it out for the rest of the season, there's going to be some weeks where you want to stray from that and you want to go with a differential in this situation. And I mean, one was last week with Havertz. I understand why you did it. It's a shame. I'm not trying to be shady because you had more points than me. You had a better week than me. You're winning our mini league right now. But imagine the week you could have had if you would listen to not my advice, but your own advice, really.
I know.
It's just one of those things where you never have a perfect FPL season. You can make up points, and maybe a different week. Like you said, we talked about this before we started recording. 7-0, you play that game 10 times, Havertz probably gets a haul in many of them, right?
Absolutely,
so
yeah.
It's just some bad luck, but I think right now with Mo Salah, especially with his form, the upcoming fixtures, I don't mind them at all when you really look at them. They have Brighton this weekend. We'll talk about his captaincy potential when we get to that, but how could you not? Especially, although Brighton are good defensively, look how good Liverpool are. We saw what Man City did to them last weekend as well. West Ham after that, Arsenal, Southampton, Everton, Wolves. Like, it doesn't matter who they're playing. Salah has to be, if not your number one captain choice every weekend, he has to be at least, top 2 or top 3. And for me, just based on my team right now, he's really my only true premium player. So I think I will be captaining him for the short term, and we'll see about long term once my team kind of changes. But it's hard to just stick with one guy every single week because there's going to be those weeks where somebody else is playing Norwich, somebody else is playing Newcastle, and they're in form as well. So it's a tricky one, but I totally understand the logic.
That's a good segue, speaking about premiums, how he's the only premium in your team. He's the only premium in my team as well. Can we make the case as of right now, maybe even for the next 2 game weeks, that you don't need another premium in your team? I mean, up front, you're not going to take Ronaldo at the moment. Lukaku is out. Harry Kane soon, probably after the next 2 game weeks where Spurs fixtures turn, or you go with Son in the midfield. But at the moment, I think he's probably the only one that you really need.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think at this stage, I don't want Ronaldo. Harry Kane, like you said, I think once the fixtures turn, if you want to get ahead of the curve, maybe you can grab Harry Kane now or Son now. And that's something that I've considered. More so, I think just based on my team and my structure and my plans, it's something I'll probably look at more so next week. I'll roll my transfer this week and look to make 2 moves next week. But I understand it for sure with the Spurs players, even though they're not playing well. The fixtures are incredible. Obviously, Lukaku's injured, so you don't want him in your team. And aside from that, like, I don't want De Bruyne. There's a few other players who are kind of in that upper echelon. Jamie Vardy is one who I would consider a premium, especially at the forward position, just based on pricing. But I think right now, based on the prices, based on the players who are delivering, there's so much value out there. There's so many good options. And I think you can really have I'd rather spend up on defense right now, despite the fact that you might not be getting a clean sheet every single week. You have to have Trent in your team. You have to have at least 1, maybe 2 Man City defenders in your team. And the same can be said about Chelsea right now. The clean sheets are coming for them. The fixtures are so good. I'd rather spend up at the back right now, which is something I've really never done. It's kind of thrown me for a loop this season, and then have budget forwards and a few budget midfielders and kind of balance out my team. And then it's really strange because right now I think I have like $3.5 million in the bank, which is just feels so strange. But my team is still performing well. I think I'm going to have a good week this week, and probably, like you said, for at least the next 1 or 2 game weeks, I don't feel like I need another premium in my team, but it's something that I'm going to look at moving forward.
One thing that still shocks me, how Mohamed Salah is not 100% owned in Fantasy Premier League, is beyond me. I know that there are a lot of FPL managers who have left their teams already, especially near the bottom. They've got frustrated after maybe the first couple of game weeks, so I can understand that. But if you're an active player and you don't have Mohamed Salah on your team, I'm not sure what you're doing. I don't think anyone can really help you. There's no argument against it. You can't argue me and say, well, I shouldn't have him in my team for this reason. There's literally zero argument that you can come at me with. But regardless, let's speak about the guy that I captained last week, Kai Havertz. And I want to say one thing. I always talk about, and we always talk about on the show, don't get too cute with your captain's picks. If you have the guy who's performing and he has a good fixture, and to be honest, United was and is a good fixture for Liverpool, considering that the form that they're in, the form that Salah's in, the form that United are in defensively, not very good. So I thought that really was a good fixture, but I saw Norwich, I saw Chelsea, Kai Havertz, a bit of a differential. He can at least get me a goal, right? He didn't do it, but that's okay. The question is now, a lot of people seem to think that they want to offload him, and I think personally that's the wrong decision. Newcastle away, Burnley at home, the next 2 fixtures. We don't know when Lukaku's coming back. I'm going to assume he's going to return after the international break, so maybe that Burnley fixture could be a bit of an issue. But not the Burnley fixture, excuse me, the Leicester fixture. So the next 2 fixtures, if Lukaku's out, Havertz should be the one playing up front with maybe Mount and Hudson-Odoi behind him. So I think he's worth holding on to.
I agree. I think this is one, and I mean, everyone's team is different. And speaking, on behalf of both of us, I think it makes sense to hang on for the next 2 weeks. Maybe you have more pressing issues, or, I mean, you look at the next 2 fixtures, like you said, Newcastle away is not a bad fixture at all, especially with the form that Chelsea are in.
Yeah.
I know he didn't get a single return on 7 goals, but that's not to say he can't against Newcastle. Yeah. And then the Burnley fixture at home, again, is a good one, depending on the situation with the other strikers and the other attackers at Chelsea. So for me, it's a hold, at least for this week. We can reassess next week. My short-term plan is to keep him, but probably, like you said, after the next 2 matches, heading into that game week 12 fixture against Leicester City away is probably when I'll look to ship him out. At least, if not next week, he'll probably be out of my team beyond that, just because. Yeah. Once those strikers, those true strikers, especially Lukaku, if he comes back healthy, Havertz won't be playing as much. And I think at that point, it's the right time. But when you see this green FDR fixtures, Newcastle and Burnley, they're on paper so good, especially for Chelsea and especially for Kai Havertz. So I think it depends on your team. Ultimately, especially with the amount of injuries, there's a lot of flagged players right now. It may not be worth a transfer, especially if you brought him in last week. There's nothing I hate more than bringing a player in and then shipping him out 1 week later.
Yeah.
I took a hit for him. I believe, did you take a hit for him too?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, so we both took hits for him. So I don't want to take a hit and then drop a guy when he delivered absolutely nothing for me. I want to give him another week or 2. So I get the logic for sure. Maybe you're unhappy with him. Maybe you captain him and you're even more unhappy with him. But I think the next 2 fixtures warrant him staying in your team.
Yeah, and sometimes you just have to be patient with these players, and things will happen. Mason Mount, thank you very much. I held on to you for, I thought, a bit too long, but you came back and you proved me wrong. 3 goals, thank you, Mason Mount. But listen, if you don't want Havertz and you want to make a move, to me, the most obvious move is to bring in Phil Foden from Manchester City. Crystal Palace at home. Really good fixture. I mean, after that, you have United, which I also think is still a very good fixture. City is a team that is pretty close to being a fixture-proof team. Phil Foden seems to be in Pep Guardiola's favorite 11. He talks about him a lot. Obviously, there is rotation risk, but there's rotation risk with Havertz, there's rotation risk with Mount. There's basically rotation risk with every single player. But I think going from Havertz to Foden makes a lot of sense, not only because you're getting a good player on a good team, but you're also getting a player that you can hold on to for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is one where if you have him already, obviously you've benefited from that. He's started the last 4 games. He's returned in 3 of them and a nice big 18-point haul this past weekend against Brighton. And if he can keep starting, especially in the position he's starting in, I think he's fantastic. And unfortunately for a lot of managers like myself, we don't have him at this point. We're kind of playing catch up. Most people probably bought him at 7.9, 8.0, and now his price is 8.1, which, going back to Kai Havertz and kind of the plan that I talked about before, if I can hang on to Havertz for the next 2 weeks, it's not like Man City. I mean, I love the fixture this weekend for Man City, of course. Crystal Palace at home, it doesn't get any better. And, I mean, really, their next fixture is Manchester United away, which if last weekend with Liverpool was any indication, that could be a great result for Man City as well. But for me, I just think between the two and also not wanting to burn a transfer on Kai Havertz, I'm looking at transferring Kai Havertz out in game week 12 for Phil Foden. Depending on what goes on, and we'll see, especially after the international break, we'll see if he's still fit. We'll see if he starts the next 2 games. And it gives me a bit more time to see, despite the fact that his price may rise again, unfortunately. And I'll take that hit. It's one of those things I don't want to always be chasing and being aggressive with my moves just to chase a price change. So for me, I think whether you grab him now or whether you grab him in the next few weeks, he's definitely the best Man City attacking option right now. I don't want to say he's nailed on because nobody is on Man City, but if anybody is, it has to be him based on his form and really just based on the track record in the last few game weeks with him getting the starts 4 weeks in a row. And long term, we talked about it weeks ago, Man City's fixtures, although they have a few tougher fixtures in the next I'd say 5 game weeks, they have obviously Manchester United away, which could be tough. West Ham, we saw them get knock them out of the Carabao Cup yesterday. And if you look at the fixtures beyond that, though, from December all the way through to February, it's a dream for Man City. And if Foden can stay in this team and keep playing in this position, I mean, it's a fantastic option for FPL. So he's on my radar. I'm not going to make the move this week, but probably 2 weeks from now I will.
Leeds have the best fixture you can possibly have this weekend against Norwich, which brings us to Raphinha. At the moment, he had an injury, but it looks like he's going to be okay according to his manager. But the question is, I love Raphinha, Marty, but what do we do with him? He's been in and out of the team due to injuries, obviously international break issues. The returns haven't really been there even when he has started in these games. I'm going to hold on to him just because his price is just too good and what he can do. He's that type of player. I think once Bamford gets back, we'll see a lot more returns from him. But at the moment, considering he's heading into this weekend against Norwich, I think we have to hold on to him. But can we make a case for maybe shipping him out in the near future?
Maybe. I mean, this is one.
It's tough, I know, because his price is fantastic and he does everything for that team.
For sure. I think this is one of those situations where it's a wait and see. He should be back this weekend, which is great. They play on Sunday, I believe, right? Yeah, Sunday morning. Yeah. So he should be back for Sunday. It's such a good fixture. I'm gonna keep him in my team just because I'm planning on rolling a transfer and I don't want to burn one on him. And I agree with you. When Bamford comes back, I believe he's back this weekend or possibly the weekend after. So he'll be back soon. I think once he's back, like you said, that'll unlock more from Raphinha. And the one thing that's frustrating with him is, the injuries. I feel like lately, whenever whether I'm watching Leeds or if I'm just following a game, I'm always thinking to myself, what time is this guy going to go off injured in the game? And it's just so frustrating because he hasn't had a full 90 or a consistent run of 90 minutes in a while. And yes, he had a couple returns in a few games recently, and then he had the one where he didn't play. Goes off injured this past weekend. It's so frustrating when you have a player where you're expecting returns, you're expecting results, and he's not delivering. Especially right now, I find that a lot of people have stronger benches, have stronger teams overall because of the lack of needing multiple premiums. And this is one of those situations where I'm in a constant benching risk and headache because every week I have to decide between one or two strong players who are at really good prices that I have to pick between. And right now, Raphinha's kind of in that mix too. Do I bench him? Do I start him? But I think for this weekend, especially because he probably will be fit, and we see what he does for this team, if he's fit, he's playing. There's no doubt. Yeah. So based on that, and I think based on the matchup, Norwich, yes, it's an away match, but it doesn't really matter when you're playing them. I think he has to be in your team, especially because he's fit, most likely. So I'll take that risk.
Yeah.
And we'll see. I wouldn't ship him out at this point. The price is too good, and the player is even better. So
yeah, Leeds have been poor this season, unfortunately. But besides the fact that he's just a fantastic player, but if you do want to ship him out, in and around his price point, there's not much. James Maddison, okay, he's been turning around, playing a bit better. Maybe you consider him, after game week 12. Torres is out. Zaha, no. Harvey Barnes, no. Tielemans, maybe he's scoring goals. Ben Rama, looks like everyone's shipping him out at the moment. Leon Bailey isn't getting starts. Trossard, Mora, Deli, Saka. I mean, there's not much there. Like, Raphinha is the best bang for your buck at the moment, even though the returns aren't really there. But for a player who does everything for his team, who has the knack for assists, who has the knack for scoring goals, he's on set pieces. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer. It's just, if he can get over these injury issues, get over these international break issues, and just start week in and week out, and hopefully Bamford returns soon, I think it's really going to help him and obviously help FPL owners. Armando Broja, Marty, 5.0 forward for Southampton. Everyone was looking at a different forward over the past few weeks, and Adam Armstrong looks like he's out. This man is in. He looks like to be a pretty good value at the striker position at the moment.
Yeah, I think this is a perfect example of what we've talked about multiple times lately, is that there's just so many great value picks in FPL this season. And I think if you, depending on how you're structuring your team, whether you have, a strong back line, maybe you have a lot of money tied up in your midfield, depending on how that looks, I think he's just such a good price right now and starting to get returns. He scored in his last two. He started, didn't get full 90, but he played about 80 minutes in each of the last two matches. And Southampton's fixtures are pretty good overall in the next few game weeks. But this is one where I think if you need to make multiple moves to get somebody in your team, just using myself as an example because it's the easiest to do, I think I talked about rolling a transfer this week, possibly making two next week. And one that I'm looking at is dropping someone like Raul Jimenez to Armando Broja, gives me some extra funds, and then I can upgrade my 4.5 midfielder to Son from Tottenham right before their fixtures turn, and I've got a really strong team. I have a strong bench, playing bench, and it gives me options to target different players, target different fixtures every single week, and it feels strange because in the past, this is not something we've ever talked about. I almost always have Deadwood on the bench, at least one or two players, maybe one playing 4.5 midfielder, maybe a playing 4.0, or his price has risen, 4.2 defender. And this is the year where value players are delivering, and I think this could be another example of that. So for me, I think depending on how you're trying to balance out your team, maybe you're trying to fit in Harry Kane, maybe you're trying to fit in Son, maybe you're looking elsewhere at a different premium or higher price player, and you need a budget forward. I think this is somebody that you should consider based on his form, based on the upcoming fixtures, but obviously keep an eye on it because he's got a little bit of I think it's a knock right now, and is only 70 or an ankle injury, 75% chance of playing, but something to monitor. Either way, if he can continue to lock down starts for Southampton, I think he's someone you should consider as a great value option. So
you mentioned shipping out Jimenez for him. What about looking at another Wolves forward in Hwang? At the moment, 5.7, only 9.3% owned. He's starting games. He's started the last four. Actually, sorry, I think the last 5 games. He's got 3 goals in those last 3 games. At 5.7, if you're swapping Jimenez, I mean, the Wolves don't have the worst fixtures. Everton, Crystal Palace. I mean, West Ham is tough, then Norwich and Burnley. So over the next couple of game weeks, it's a pretty good run. And he's scoring goals. He's either starting with Jimenez, either right beside him or behind him or on the right side, or he's starting ahead of Jimenez. So I think, and Broja is fantastic, obviously at 5.0, but a 5.7 for another player who seems to be a consistent starter in this 11, I think he's worth a shout.
Yeah, I totally agree. This is someone I've had my eye on as well, and I think depending on the structure of your team, if you like Wolves especially, he's a good option. Obviously, you're going to have to pay that extra 0.7 million, so if you have the money, it could be worth it, absolutely, just because, like you've said, the starts may be a bit more consistent. The minutes is always a big factor, especially if you need him to play. Some weeks, depending on how your team is set up, maybe you can bench your third striker, or if you're going with a lot of value players up top, you need these players to play. So he's probably a safer option in terms of minutes, especially the fact that he is actually scoring goals consistently and seems to have a decent partnership going with Jimenez. So I like that option too. And like we've said, time and time again, this is the year where you can find so many good budget midfielders and forwards, and he's just another great example of that.
Yeah, and you know what I love about these guys? It's such low risk, high reward. If he doesn't play, you have him on the bench, and obviously you have a working bench, you can bring another player in, whether it be a defender like a Livramento or something like that. So low risk, high reward players, my favorite. Marty, before we get into the captains, probably the only captain pick, is there anything else you want to touch on?
No, I think this is this is one of those weeks where I think most people, I mean, there's a lot of flags.
Yeah.
This week, there's a ton of players who are questionable. Like we always say, wait, don't make any early moves this week, and go with your gut with most things, except for one. There's one thing you don't ever have to stray from. Mo Salah's captain this week, and I mean, we said that he's not necessarily someone you're going to lock in every single week as captain, but this is one of those weeks where I don't know why you wouldn't. And you touched on it, I think, just briefly earlier. You said you don't know how he's not 100% owned, and
yeah.
I agree. I think he's just shy of 70% owned, I believe, at the moment, and I agree. Like, how could you not have this guy on your team unless you're not playing anymore and you didn't have him? Sure, I get it, but Mo Salah, he has to be your captain pick of the week. His stats this year are just insane. And I saw this on Twitter. Somebody had pointed it out. Let me just grab it. It's on my phone here.
Yeah.
He has 107 total points this season, which is the highest in FPL, of course. He's been on a tear. He's 50 points higher than the next player, which is Jamie Vardy and Mikel Antonio tied at 57 points. So this guy has more than double the output over anybody else, and or I guess not more than double, bad math there, but just about double. And it's just crazy how incredible he's been this season. He might be the best player ever in FPL. You look at the consistency, every season. His debut season, he had 30 goals. He's had just in and around 20 goals every season, and I mean he's already at 10 this year. So if he doesn't crack 25, I'd be shocked. So he has to be your captain pick this week. The Brighton match at home is a good one, despite the fact that they're good defensively. Mm-hmm. But I don't care about that. I look at Mo Salah and what he can do for me. And if you're not captaining him this weekend, you are crazy. I just can't imagine going with anybody else.
Marty, coming with the heat today. I love it. Mohamed Salah, to think about it, 10 goals and 6 assists in 9 game weeks is unbelievable. Brighton, though, I think it is a tough fixture for Liverpool. I think they obviously come away with the win. I think they're just going to be too good for them. But Mohamed Salah, 4 goals in 6 matches against him in the Premier League, in the last 6 matches, excuse me. But Brighton kind of been a bit of a bogey team over the last 2 matches, though. They beat them 1-0 last season, and then 1-1. So 1-0 was actually at Anfield, and then 1-1 was away at Brighton. But, yeah, I think it's kind of a no-brainer at the moment. I mean, it's just, how do you do it? After last week, Havertz had Norwich, and you're thinking, you know what, he can give Salah a run for his money for that captaincy pick. But, I mean, I don't want to stray away from him. But we have to give out some different picks, Marty, because the people want to know. Someone like me, I might change my mind last minute and go with, I don't know, Phil Foden against Crystal Palace.
It's not crazy. I mean, based on his, I mean, it is crazy because you have to go with Mo. But if you're one of those 30% of people who doesn't have him and you can't get him into your team, or you really want to, maybe for some reason you've got some inside information and think Brighton get a result against Liverpool. But I get it. Like, just looking at the fixture alone, Crystal Palace at home for Man City, especially after losing in the Carabao Cup, Pep's going to be pissed. He's going to tell them to go out and score 7 goals just to make a statement. So I think this is one where you could consider Phil Foden. I wouldn't, again, with Man City, obviously there's always some rotation risk. There's nothing worse than captaining a player and then you get that lineup and you see he's on the bench and you're just praying he either doesn't play so that your vice captain, probably Mo Salah, gets your points, or you're praying that if he does get that 15-minute cameo, he does something. But I think it's understandable if you look at that. But I just think you can't look anywhere else. I mean, maybe if you're one of these people who does absolutely not want to captain Mo Salah, or you don't own him, hopefully you own a good player like this or another player who can get a good haul for you this weekend. Whether it's a Man City attacker, maybe a Chelsea attacker against Newcastle as well.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
It could be an option, but for me, there's a gap. It's Mo Salah at the top, and then quite a large gap between, I'd say, him and anybody else. So it's a bit of a risky thing. And if you do it, you can't complain about it. If it doesn't work out for you, this is one where, even if Mo Salah blanks and maybe Phil Foden goes off and you captain Mo over Phil Foden, you can't be upset about it either, because the more obvious, the more, I guess, consistently correct choice has been Salah. So I get it, but aside from maybe those 2 players, maybe a Chelsea attacker, if you own Mount, you want to ride his good form now. And aside from those guys, I just don't really see the point of captaining anybody else at this weekend.
Yeah, I think Mason Mount's probably going to garner a lot more captain ownership this week than he has in a long time, just because of what happened, those 3 goals, that hat trick against Norwich. Havertz, obviously, worth a shout out. I don't know if many people want to go back to him, but this is probably the week where he does scores, and everyone's going to be frustrated that they didn't captain him when Mo Salah blanks against Brighton. I hope not, because I'm probably going to captain Mohamed Salah. Any other players I can consider? I mean, you can look at maybe a Man City defender. But even then, Crystal Palace, they look pretty deadly going forward. I mean, Edouard and Benteke have been scoring goals. Spurs United, I probably wouldn't touch any players in those games, even though I do think that Kane can score in that game, Son can score in that game. I think Ronaldo can score in that game, possibly even Mason Greenwood if you still have him. Raphinha, if he's in, I think maybe worth a shout. And then maybe Mikel Antonio against Aston Villa. Villa have had some defensive issues as of late. But other than that, I think number 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, Mohamed Salah, Marty.
I agree. It's just one of those things where not only, I mean, we saw it last week. Last week's a perfect example of if you captain Mo Salah, you could go from a good game week to a great game week. And
oh my God! Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately for you, you were at the mercy of that.
How do I do that? We come on this show every week, and I say, don't get cute with your captain pick. And I think after that show, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to captain Mohamed Salah, obviously. And
I'm not going to lie.
I go Havertz.
Yeah, I was.
You know what it was? I'll tell you what it is. I just wanted that little edge on you. I'm like, if he scores, I got the edge on Marty this week.
Yeah. Well, and you.
And
did,
I did. Yeah.
You had Phil Foden. You had Mason Mount. You're just absolutely crushing me all weekend. And I was in a bad mood. I was not happy about it. I was in the middle of a move. So we're moving apartments. I'm tired. I'm sore everywhere.
Yeah.
It's just frustrating. I couldn't watch the Arsenal game on Friday. It's just a whole thing. I'm getting absolutely smoked by you in FPL. You passed me in our mini league, and then my savior, the Scorpion King.
Oh man, the Scorpion King.
He just comes out and just saves my week. Completely saved my week because I captained him and helped bridge that gap a little bit between you and I. And I think although it helped me, I think you're going to learn from that and probably go with the more obvious choice this weekend. So.
Yeah, you would think so. Wait till you see my team.
So.
Wait till you see my team points this week. Exactly. Upset pick of the week, Marty, the best part of the show. We were talking about this before we started. Not much here in terms of upset of the week. I mean, we looked at the Leicester-Arsenal game. It's a pick'em. Burnley-Brentford is a pick'em. Liverpool-Brighton. We don't think Brighton's going to do anything against Liverpool. I don't think Palace is going to beat City. I doubt Newcastle is going to get a result against Chelsea. Watford-Southampton pick'em. Spurs-United, who knows? I actually like Norwich to get a result against Leeds. That's my upset pick of the week. They've been better at home. They haven't been good. They don't win the season, but they've been better at home. Leeds, one of the worst teams in the league at the moment, in relegation form, I should say. So I think Norwich will look at this match as one of the fixtures where, like, hey, we can get a result here. We're at home against a team who's been poor. They just got knocked out of the Carabao Cup by Arsenal. I mean, they didn't look very good at all. I know they didn't play their first 11, but a lot of their first 11 was in that team. I'm thinking there could be a result here. Finally, can we see Norwich pick up 3 points? So I'm going to go with it.
I mean, maybe after a 7-0 defeat.
I know they're bad. But that's against Chelsea. They're gonna get smashed against these big teams. It's just gonna happen. But against Leeds, I don't know. Daniel Farke, come on, man. Come on, buddy.
Yeah, it's just one of those where it's so tricky. I mean, they've only scored, I think, 2 goals this season, Norwich, and maybe
brutal.
I mean, Leeds defensively have not been great by any means.
No,
they've conceded 16 goals, but I think this is one of those weeks where I don't really have an upset pick of the week. Just because there's nothing I really like. I look at when we walk through all the games and you were listing them off. I agree. Most of these, there's nothing that screams big upset or anything too exciting. Arsenal against Leicester, I think that's an interesting one on Saturday morning. I guess at this stage, Arsenal getting a result would be an upset, and I just don't know which version of Arsenal shows up. I think the big games, I don't see Newcastle beating Chelsea. I don't see City or Liverpool dropping points. So for me, I don't know if there's an upset pick of the week. I think the one that I've got my eye on in terms of, not necessarily an upset, but in terms of, I don't know which way this one's going, and I'd like to see what you think is Spurs Manchester United on Saturday early afternoon here. I
honestly don't know. I think we should expect some sort of reaction, some sort of bounce back from Manchester United after losing 5-0 to Liverpool at home. Spurs are Heckle and Jekyll. You don't know what team is going to show up, and when they do show up, they don't look convincing. Harry Kane, it's not quite hit the stride yet. Son is still coming into his own. The defense is a bit suspect. I don't know. I think this can be a really dry game or a very high scoring game. I can't pick a winner here, but I mean,
maybe a draw.
I want to give the edge to Spurs being at home, and they're taking on United at probably one of the worst times they've in probably the last 5 or 6 seasons, but I don't see it. I'm going to go with the draw, even though I think in my heart of hearts I think United is going to win and Ronaldo's going to show his class on that day. I hope not, but we'll see what happens. But I want to talk about Norwich quick, okay? So let's disregard. We shouldn't, but let's disregard that 7-goal loss to Chelsea. And they've only conceded 6 goals in their last 6 without losing 7-0. So 0-0 with Brighton, 0-0 with Burnley. They lost 2-0 to Everton, 3-1 to Watford, not the greatest result, and then only 1-0 to Norwich. So the defense is coming around. I think since he switched that back 3/back 5, they've been a bit better. Why am I making this huge case for Norwich at the moment?
I don't know.
They're my upset pick of the week, okay? That's all I want to say. I think defensively, they've become a bit better. Going forward is obviously a big issue, but they just need one. They just need 1 goal. You think Salah score? I know we're going to captain, obviously, but do you 100% think he scores this week?
Oh, I have
no doubt
faith in him than anyone. Yeah. Oh, yeah. This guy, and I mean the fact that not that you can never predict a penalty. He's on penalties if that situation arises, and I think just his confidence level is through the roof right now, and I don't know how you stop him. Nobody's been able to in the last, this whole season. So
no, what a player. Well, that's it for us. That's it for the FPL show Game Week 10 preview. I'm Alba Vartanian. He's Martin Levionnois. If you like the video, make your like official. Hit that like button. Subscribe. Hit the bell. Every week we will have a preview show, whether it's international break or not. We're going to bring all the news and notes and captaincy. But really, heading into this weekend, have a good weekend. But most importantly, Marty, tell him. Captain Mohamed Salah, the Scorpion King, as said by the FPL Oracle.